I'm Jake, 42M, the uncle of two nieces, Sadie, 14F, and Ellie, 11F. They're my sister Laura's, 39F, daughters. I've been a part of their lives since they were born, watching them grow from babies to the young girls they are today. Our family has always been close-knit. Laura and I grew up in a small town in Oregon, where everyone knew each other. Our parents, now retired, still live in the same house we grew up in. Laura and I both moved to Portland after college, wanting to stay close to our roots but also experience city life. We ended up living just a few blocks apart, which made it easy to stay involved in each other's lives. When Laura had Sadie, I was instantly smitten. I was 28 at the time, single, and focused on my career in software development. But becoming an uncle changed something in me. I loved spending time with Sadie, reading her stories, taking her to the park, and later, teaching her how to ride a bike. When Ellie came along 3 years later, my heart just grew bigger. As the girls grew up, I found myself becoming the fun uncle. I was the one who would take them on adventures, teach them silly jokes, and sneak them extra dessert when their parents weren't looking. My wife Melissa, who I met when the girls were 5 and 2, quickly embraced her role as their aunt. She's a geologist, and her passion for rocks and nature sparked a similar interest in both girls. Sadie and Ellie, despite their age difference, were always close. They shared a love for the outdoors, often joining Melissa and me on short hiking trips or weekend camping adventures. Sadie was the leader, always coming up with creative games or stories, while Ellie was her eager sidekick, ready for any adventure her big sister proposed. I remember one camping trip when Sadie was 10 and Ellie was 7. We were setting up the tent when it started to rain. Instead of complaining, Sadie turned it into a game. She pretended the raindrops were fairy tears, and we had to collect them in cups to save the fairy kingdom. Ellie was enchanted, and even Melissa and I found ourselves caught up in the magic of Sadie's imagination. That night, huddled in our tent listening to the rain, Sadie told ghost stories that had us all alternating between shivers and giggles. But things started to change when Sadie hit middle school. The vibrant, imaginative girl began to withdraw. At first, it was subtle. She'd be less enthusiastic about our family game nights, often checking her phone instead of fully participating. Then she started declining invitations to go hiking or camping, preferring to stay home and chat with her friends online. I tried to connect with her in new ways. I asked about her favorite social media apps and even downloaded a few myself, thinking we could bond over them. But Sadie seemed annoyed by my attempts, rolling her eyes and telling me I was too old to understand. Ellie, meanwhile, continued to flourish. She joined the school science club and would excitedly share facts about rocks and plants she'd learned. She begged us to take her fossil hunting and was over the moon when we found a small ammonite on one of our trips. The growing divide between the sisters became more apparent at family gatherings. Sadie would sit in a corner, glued to her phone, while Ellie bounced around, engaging with everyone. I tried not to show favoritism, but it was hard not to respond more positively to Ellie's enthusiasm. Last month, Melissa and I started planning a 2-week trip to Yellowstone National Park. We've been wanting to go for years, and with some recent success at work, we finally had the time and means to make it happen. We were excited about the prospect of seeing the geothermal features, diverse wildlife, and stunning landscapes. During a family dinner at my parents' house, we brought up our plans. Ellie's eyes lit up immediately. "Can I come? Please, please, please," she begged. "I want to see Old Faithful and the colorful hot springs and maybe even a bear." From far away, of course. Sadie, who was sitting across the table, barely looked up from her phone. The only time she showed any interest was when she asked, "Do they have Wi-Fi in Yellowstone?" When we explained that Wi-Fi would be limited, especially when we were camping, Sadie scoffed and said, "Sounds boring." After discussing it with Melissa, we agreed that Ellie could join us if her parents approved. We thought it would be a great opportunity for her to experience the wonders of one of America's most famous national parks and indulge her growing interest in geology. A few days later, I received an angry call from Laura. She accused me of playing favorites and deliberately excluding Sadie from the trip. I was taken aback and explained that we hadn't formally invited either of the girls. Ellie had asked to come along, and we agreed. I also pointed out that Sadie hadn't shown any interest in the trip and that her constant phone use wouldn't be compatible with the nature-focused vacation we had planned. Laura wasn't satisfied with my explanation. She insisted that I should have explicitly invited both girls, regardless of their interests. She even suggested that I was trying to punish Sadie for her recent behavior changes. "You used to have such a special bond with Sadie," Laura said, her voice thick with emotion. "Do you know how much it hurts her to see you connecting with Ellie while she feels left out?" I felt a pang of guilt at her words. Had I really been so obvious in my preference for Ellie's company lately? I tried to explain to Laura that it wasn't about favoritism, but about choosing a travel companion who would enjoy and appreciate the kind of trip we had planned. Sadie would be miserable without reliable internet, I argued. She'd complain the whole time and make the trip unpleasant for everyone. "You don't know that?" Laura countered. "Maybe this could be an opportunity for her to disconnect and rediscover her love for nature. But you're not even giving her the chance." The conversation ended with both of us frustrated and upset. Laura hung up after saying she was deeply disappointed in me, words that stung more than I cared to admit. Now, I find myself questioning my decision. On one hand, I stand by my reasoning. This is supposed to be a relaxing vacation for Melissa and me, not a babysitting job or intervention for a phone-addicted teenager. We specifically chose Yellowstone for its natural wonders and opportunities for outdoor activities, things Sadie has shown zero interest in lately. On the other hand, I can't help but wonder if I'm contributing to Sadie's withdrawal by not making more of an effort to include her. Maybe Laura is right, and this could have been a chance for Sadie to reconnect with her old interests. I also worry about the long-term effects on my relationship with Sadie and the dynamics between the sisters. Am I inadvertently driving a wedge between them? Will Sadie resent Ellie for going on this trip without her? Will this deepen the growing rift in our once close family? Part of me wants to stand my ground. After all, Sadie is old enough to speak up if she wanted to join the trip. And why should we risk ruining our long-awaited vacation on the off chance that Sadie might suddenly develop an interest in nature and family bonding? But another part of me feels guilty. I think back to the little girl who used to beg me for piggyback rides and hang on my every word. When did I stop trying to engage with her on her level? Have I been too quick to write her off as a lost cause? I'm at a loss for what to do. Changing our plans now would mean disappointing Ellie, who's been excitedly planning for the trip. It might also lead to a tense and uncomfortable vacation if Sadie comes along unwillingly. But keeping things as they are could cause a serious rift in the family. So, Reddit, Ida for not inviting Sadie on our family camping trip? Should I have made more of an effort to include her despite her apparent lack of interest? Or am I right to want to enjoy my vacation without the stress of dealing with a reluctant, phone-addicted teenager? Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since my original post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their input. It gave me a lot to think about and ultimately led to some important conversations and decisions. After reading the comments, I realized I needed to have an honest conversation with Laura about the situation. I invited her over for coffee, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination as I waited for her to arrive. When Laura got to my house, the tension was palpable. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we used to sit as kids, doing homework and sharing secrets. It felt strange to be at odds in this familiar setting. I started by apologizing for how our last phone conversation ended. I never meant to hurt Sadie or make her feel left out, I said. I guess I've been so focused on the trip itself that I didn't consider the bigger picture. Laura's expression softened a bit. I know you didn't mean to, she said. But Jake, you have to understand how it looks from our perspective. Sadie used to adore you, and now she feels like you've given up on her. As we talked, Laura opened up about the struggles they've been having with Sadie at home. Apparently, Sadie's phone addiction has been causing a lot of tension. Laura admitted she and Tom have been arguing about how to handle it. Tom thinks Sadie will grow out of it, while Laura wants to set stricter rules. We feel like we're losing her, Laura confessed, her eyes welling up. She barely talks to us anymore. She's falling behind in school. We don't know what to do. Then Laura revealed something that shed new light on the situation. Sadie has been dealing with anxiety, and she's been using her phone as a coping mechanism. This information made me see her behavior in a different light, and I felt a pang of guilt for not noticing earlier. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, reaching out to squeeze Laura's hand. We didn't want to burden anyone, she replied. And honestly, we were a bit embarrassed. We feel like we failed her somehow. As we continued to talk, we reminisced about our own teenage years. We laughed about how our parents didn't understand our obsession with landline phones and how we'd fight over who got to use the internet. It helped put Sadie's behavior into perspective. Remember how Mom and Dad would force us to go camping to reconnect with nature? Laura said with a chuckle. We'd complain the whole way there, but then end up having a great time. That sparked an idea. After some discussion, we came up with a compromise. Instead of the 2-week Yellowstone trip, we decided to split it into 2 shorter trips. The first week will be at Yellowstone with Ellie, as originally planned. For the second week, we're going to rent a cabin by a lake that has Wi-Fi. We'll invite both girls to this trip, hoping it will be a good middle ground. I also promised Laura that I'd make more of an effort to connect with Sadie on her terms. Maybe I've been too quick to judge her interests without trying to understand them. Laura agreed to talk to Tom about setting some reasonable boundaries for Sadie's phone use at home. After our talk, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The next step was to talk to Sadie. Laura suggested I come over for dinner that evening, giving me a chance to speak with Sadie in person. When I arrived at their house, Sadie was, predictably, on her phone. But when Laura asked her to put it away for dinner, she did so without much fuss. Throughout the meal, I made an effort to engage Sadie in conversation, asking about her friends and what she's been up to lately. After dinner, I asked Sadie if we could talk privately. She seemed surprised but agreed. We went out to the backyard and sat on the old swing set where I used to push her as a little girl. I started by apologizing for not inviting her to the Yellowstone trip. I should have at least asked if you were interested, I said. I'm sorry if I made you feel left out. Sadie shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, but I could see a flicker of hurt in her eyes. It's whatever, she mumbled. I probably would have been bored anyway. I took a deep breath and explained our new plan for the 2 trips. To my surprise, Sadie seemed interested in the lake trip. Could I bring a friend? she asked hesitantly. Let me talk to your parents about that, I replied. But I think we could probably work something out for at least part of the trip. As we continued to talk, Sadie opened up a bit more. She mentioned that she's been watching some nature documentaries lately, on her phone, of course, and might like to try fishing. Dad keeps talking about teaching me, but we never seem to find the time, she said. I saw an opportunity and seized it. Well, how about I teach you? We could go to the local park this weekend and practice casting. No pressure to catch anything, just learning the basics. Sadie considered for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, okay. That might be cool. As I left that evening, I felt cautiously optimistic. It wasn't a complete breakthrough, but it felt like a step in the right direction. I'm hoping this will give me a chance to rebuild my relationship with Sadie while still enjoying some outdoor time with Ellie. The Yellowstone trip is coming up in a few days. I'm excited to share that experience with Ellie, but I'm also looking forward to the lake trip with both girls. It won't be perfect, but it feels like we're moving towards a better understanding. I'll update again after we return from Yellowstone and before the lake trip. Wish us luck. Update 2. We just got back from the Yellowstone trip with Ellie, and I have to say, it was an incredible experience. The park was even more breathtaking than I had imagined, with its diverse landscapes, vibrant geothermal features, and abundant wildlife. Ellie was an absolute joy to have along. Her enthusiasm for nature was contagious, and she soaked up information like a sponge. We saw Old Faithful erupt, which was a highlight for all of us. Ellie timed the intervals between eruptions and explained to us how the pressure builds up underground. Her knowledge impressed even the park ranger who was giving a talk nearby. One of the most exciting moments was when we spotted a grizzly bear from a safe distance. Ellie, who had been reading about wildlife safety, calmly reminded us of the proper protocols. It was amazing to see her apply what she had learned in such a real and potentially dangerous situation. We also did some stargazing, which was incredible due to the lack of light pollution. Ellie kept a detailed journal of all the plants and animals we encountered, often sketching what she saw. Her artistic skills have really improved, and Melissa and I found ourselves looking forward to her nightly journal time where she'd share her observations from the day. However, the trip wasn't without its challenges. On the third day, Ellie got a bad case of poison ivy. We had to make an unplanned trip to a nearby urgent care center. Despite the discomfort, Ellie remained in good spirits and didn't let it ruin the trip. She even joked that it was part of the authentic outdoor experience. The poison ivy incident led to some unexpected bonding time. While Ellie rested in the camper, we played board games and shared stories. It reminded me of rainy days spent indoors during childhood family vacations, and I found myself feeling nostalgic. Throughout the trip, I couldn't help but think about Sadie. There were moments when I wished she could see the amazing sights we were experiencing. I even caught myself taking extra photos and videos, thinking I could share them with her later. While we were away, Laura kept me updated on Sadie. Apparently, Sadie had been asking about our trip and seemed a bit regretful about not coming. Laura said she caught Sadie watching Yellowstone documentaries on her phone. This news gave me a glimmer of hope that perhaps Sadie's interest in nature wasn't completely lost. Our fishing trip before we left had gone surprisingly well. Sadie had been frustrated at first, struggling to get the hang of casting. But once she managed to cast successfully a few times, her competitive nature kicked in and she became determined to improve. We didn't catch any fish, but we did have some good conversations. Sadie opened up about some of the pressures she feels at school and with her friends, which helped me understand her behavior a bit better. When we returned from Yellowstone, we had a family dinner to share our experiences. To everyone's surprise, Sadie asked a lot of questions about the trip. She seemed genuinely interested in Ellie's stories and even asked to see her nature journal. There was a moment when Sadie laughed at one of Ellie's jokes about a particularly smelly hot spring, and I saw a flash of the old sisterly bond they used to share. The lake trip is scheduled for next week. Sadie has been showing more interest in it, even asking if we could bring some board games along. It seems like the time apart may have had a positive effect on both girls. Ellie has been excitedly telling Sadie about all the things they could do together at the lake. I'm feeling more optimistic about the upcoming trip, but I'm also a bit nervous. I want to make sure both girls feel included and enjoy themselves. I've been researching some activities that might interest both of them, like paddleboarding and nighttime storytelling around the campfire. I'm also planning to bring my old guitar along, thinking we might have some sing-alongs like we used to do when the girls were younger. One thing I'm particularly looking forward to is teaching both girls how to skip stones on the lake. It's something my dad taught Laura and me when we were kids, and I have fond memories of competitions to see who could get the most skips. I'm hoping it might be a way to create a new shared experience for Sadie and Ellie. I've also decided to limit my own phone use during the trip. I want to set a good example for Sadie and show her that it's possible to enjoy life without being constantly connected. Melissa has agreed to do the same, though we'll have our phones available for emergencies. As the lake trip approaches, I find myself both excited and apprehensive. I'm looking forward to spending time with both my nieces, but I'm also aware that it might not all be smooth sailing. Sadie's mood can be unpredictable, and I'm prepared for some potential conflicts or sullen moments. Still, I'm committed to making this trip a positive experience for everyone. I'll update again after the lake trip to let you know how it goes. Fingers crossed for good weather and good attitudes. Update 3, we're back from the lake trip, and I have to say, it went better than I ever expected. Both Sadie and Ellie seemed to enjoy themselves, and we managed to find a good balance of activities that appealed to everyone. The first day was a bit rocky. Sadie was quieter than usual and spent a lot of time on her phone. But things took a turn when I suggested we try fishing from the dock. To my surprise, Sadie was the first one to grab a rod. She remembered the basics from our practice session and was determined to catch something. After about an hour of no bites, just as Sadie was starting to get frustrated, her line suddenly went taut. With some coaching from me and cheering from Ellie, Sadie reeled in a small bass. The look of pride and excitement on her face was priceless. She even asked Ellie to take a picture of her with the fish before we released it back into the lake. That seemed to break the ice. Sadie became more engaged in other activities after that. She tried kayaking for the first time and discovered she had a knack for it. We even had a race across the lake, with Sadie and Ellie in one kayak and Melissa and me in another. The girls won, mostly because Melissa and I were laughing too hard to paddle effectively. Ellie continued to be her usual enthusiastic self, but she also made an effort to include Sadie in her explorations. They worked together to create a scavenger hunt for Melissa and me, which was a lot of fun. Watching them giggle and whisper as they planned it reminded me of how they used to be. The cabin's Wi-Fi wasn't great, which initially caused some grumbling from Sadie. But after the first day, she seemed less concerned about it. We introduced a phone-free time each day, where we all put our devices away and played board games or told stories. To my surprise, Sadie was often the one to remind us when it was time to put the phones away. One evening, as we sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows, Sadie opened up to me about her anxiety. She explained that social media had been a way for her to feel connected to her friends, but she admitted it sometimes made her feel worse. We had a good talk about finding a balance and healthier ways to cope with anxiety. I shared some of my own experiences with stress and the techniques I've learned to manage it. It felt like a breakthrough moment in our relationship. The trip wasn't perfect, we had a few rainy days that led to some cabin fever, and there was one argument between the girls over who got to use the kayak first. But overall, it was a positive experience for everyone. On the last night, we had an impromptu talent show. Ellie did a comedy routine, Melissa shared some geology facts in the style of a rap, and I played a few songs on my guitar. But the highlight was Sadie, who surprised us all by doing a stand-up paddleboard yoga routine she'd been practicing in secret. Watching her balance on the board in the fading sunlight, I felt a surge of pride and affection. As we packed up to leave, both girls were already asking when we could come back. They even started planning activities for next time, which warmed my heart. Laura called me after we got back, thanking me for giving both girls a chance. She said she's seen a positive change in Sadie since the trip, with less phone use and more interest in family activities. Sadie has even asked about taking kayaking lessons. Looking back, I realize I had been too quick to judge Sadie based on her recent behavior. This trip gave me the opportunity to reconnect with her and understand her better. It also showed Sadie that she can enjoy activities outside of her comfort zone. I've learned a valuable lesson from this experience. It's easy to make assumptions about people, especially teenagers, based on surface-level behavior. But taking the time to understand and connect can make a world of difference. I'm grateful for the advice I received here, which encouraged me to find a compromise and make an effort with both of my nieces. While I know we'll still have challenges ahead, Sadie is a teenager after all, I feel like we've turned a corner. I'm looking forward to planning more inclusive family activities in the future and continuing to strengthen my relationships with both Sadie and Ellie.